Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift into a story about something we've all felt, the sting of a missed opportunity. Maybe it was a job, a relationship, a conversation you never started. Or maybe it was something quieter, harder to name. The kind of opportunity that disappears before you even realize what it was. We'll walk slowly through that moment, step by step, looking at what it reveals, not just about the world, but about ourselves. Along the way, you'll notice how tightly the mind holds onto the what could have been, and how, with gentleness, we can learn to release that grip. You'll be reminded of this. You will never control the world, but you can learn to control how you respond to it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. I'd love to know. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit in the memory like it's a room you haven't visited in a long time. The lighting is strange, soft in some corners, harsh in others. You know what's coming, but you still walk in carefully. There it is, the thing you missed. You remember it so clearly, though you wish you didn't. An offer, an open door, a chance that, for reasons both loud and quiet, you didn't take. Maybe you were scared. Maybe you thought you had more time. Maybe you simply didn't see it for what it was. The world didn't end, of course, but something small inside you shifted. A weight settled in your chest, not heavy enough to crush you, just enough to haunt. What do you do with that? You've probably told the story before to a friend, to yourself. You might have rewritten it in your mind 100 times, each version slightly different. In one version, you said yes. In another, you ran faster. In another still, someone else made the choice for you. But all those imagined edits lead to the same place, right here, now, where it still didn't happen. It's strange how the mind holds onto what never occurred more tightly than what did. In the quiet that follows, you notice something peculiar. The longer you stare at the opportunity you missed, the more it starts to shift. It's no longer just a single moment frozen in time. It's something else. A mirror, maybe. A teacher, possibly. But it's definitely not just a loss. The Stoics would tell you this. It was never really yours. Epictetus, born a slave, taught that what is not within your control is already lost or never gained. And that includes outcomes. That includes doors that seemed made just for you. His was a life shaped by absence. And yet he called that absence clarity. So what does it say about you, that you still grieve the chance you didn't take? It says you care. It says you hoped. It says you thought you knew what would have been best for you. But hope, as Seneca once hinted in his own way, is a twin to fear. Both are projections into the unknown. Both tie your heart to things you cannot touch. Let's pause here. Do you remember where you were when it happened? Not just the room or the city, but the version of yourself you inhabited, what you believed, what you feared. You were a different person then. You didn't have the information you have now. You hadn't weathered the storms you've since survived. So what right does the present you have to condemn that earlier self for not knowing what would come? No one makes perfect decisions in real time. That's why the Stoics trained themselves to release attachment to outcomes. You act with integrity, with courage, with reason. The rest is not up to you. And yet, you still feel it, don't you? The flicker of what if. You imagine your life turning out brighter, easier, fuller. That's the paradox. Your brain is wired to complete unfinished loops, and few loops are more torturous than the ones where you almost succeeded. But let me offer you something different tonight. Not an answer, not a fix, just a thought whispered slowly. What if the missed opportunity wasn't a mistake but a moment of alignment? What if life, in its strange and silent wisdom, was guiding you, not away from something but toward something else? The Stoics didn't ask us to erase emotion. They asked us to understand it. You feel grief over what you missed because you think it would have completed something in you. But what if the lesson wasn't in the gain, but in the gap? What if you weren't supposed to get what you wanted, so you could see what you already had? You begin to sit with that idea quietly. It's not easy. Your ego resists it. It wants stories of triumph, redemption, perfect timing. But Stoicism is not a philosophy of fairy tales. It is a philosophy of inner architecture. You are not here to chase what's gone. You are here to understand yourself in its absence. So tonight, you don't try to reclaim the past. You simply observe it. You walk the outline of the missed opportunity like a shoreline after the tide has gone out. You find little fragments scattered in the sand, memories, emotions, questions. You pick them up gently. Some you keep. Others you let the sea take back. And in that quiet walk you find something you didn't expect. Not closure. Not erasure, but a kind of grace. The kind that says, you missed it and that's okay. The kind that adds, you're still here. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only opportunity that ever truly mattered. You turn now to the exact instant it happened, the moment you froze. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. No doors slammed. No clock stopped ticking. In fact, from the outside, it might have looked like nothing at all. A quiet pause. A breath held just a little too long. But inside, it felt like a fracture. You were presented with a path, maybe not clearly lit, maybe not perfectly safe, but it was there. And in that fragile slice of time, you hesitated. You doubted, you stood still. Sometimes people imagine big life moments as storms or explosions, but more often they're quiet, delicate thresholds, easily missed. That's what this was for you. And in that stillness, something slipped. You may have told yourself, I'll decide tomorrow. I just need a little more time. I'm not ready yet. Maybe you waited for a sign, for permission, for someone else to nudge you forward. But Stoicism teaches that hesitation can be its own kind of decision. Not to act is also to choose. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. You could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow. His words are not judgment. They are invitation. Why did you freeze? It's a question that hums beneath your skin, not with shame but curiosity. You may discover that the freeze came from fear, not of failure but of change. Because sometimes, getting what you want means becoming someone you're not sure you can be yet. Or perhaps the hesitation was your intuition, your inner compass urging you to pause. Not all hesitation is cowardice. Some is wisdom in disguise. But here's the Stoic twist. Whether your pause was fear or foresight, it's gone now. The moment passed. It fossilized into memory. And you are left walking through its echo, trying to understand. Let's slow down again. Feel what it was like, that tightness in your chest, the dryness in your mouth, the thousand thoughts clashing in your mind, none of them complete, all of them loud. One of the central Stoic principles is proherses, your capacity to choose your inner response, no matter the outer chaos. Epictetus taught that even a slave could be free if he guarded that inner citadel. So even when you froze, even when you didn't act, you still had your agency. You still have it now. This moment, too, is a choice. You could turn away from the memory. You could stuff it into a drawer and pretend it never mattered. Or you can sit beside it like you would with an old friend who disappointed you. Not with anger, just with presence. Let's try something. Imagine you could go back, not to change the moment, but to stand beside yourself in it. What would you say? Maybe nothing. Maybe just a hand on your own shoulder, a deep breath, a quiet voice saying, it's okay not to know. You begin to see it differently now, not as a failure, but as a snapshot of your humanity. You were trying. Even in hesitation, you were trying. The paradox here is gentle and strange. You froze, and in that freeze, you became more aware of what mattered. You learned what your fear was protecting. You learned what you truly valued. And maybe you learned what you weren't yet willing to let go of. That's worth something. There's an old Stoic idea that no moment is wasted if it teaches you virtue. If it brings you closer to wisdom, even by an inch, it was not in vain. So what did this moment teach? Maybe it taught patience, or humility, or the fragility of desire. Maybe it showed you that the world will keep spinning whether you leap or linger, and that your job is not to chase every opening, but to choose your responses with care. The ancient philosopher Cleans once compared life to a cart pulled by fate. You can either walk behind the cart willingly or be dragged by it. The choice, he said, is yours. You missed your moment. But tonight you walk beside that cart with calm eyes. You don't rewrite the past, you walk with it. And that's the beginning of freedom. Now think back to the sound around you at that time. The hum of traffic, the rustle of trees, the murmurs of people nearby. The world was still unfolding, unaware of your decision, indifferent to your pause, and maybe that's comforting. Maybe you don't have to carry this moment like a scar. Maybe it can be something else, a chapter, a stepping stone, a lantern that didn't light the path forward but did light the path inward. You realize now that freezing wasn't the end of the story. It was a comma, a turning, and you're still writing what comes next. You take one last breath inside this memory, then exhale softly. No more blame, no more replaying, just this quiet understanding. You hesitated, you learned, and you are still moving. You begin to look more closely at what you were chasing, the thing you thought you wanted. It shimmered in your mind, didn't it? That job, that person, that place you were so sure would complete the puzzle. It looked like certainty. It felt like clarity. You might have wrapped your hopes around it, silently believing that everything would finally fall into place if only you had this one thing. But Stoicism gently asks a question here. Were you drawn to the thing itself, or to the idea of it? So often, what we long for isn't real. It's a mirage, a story we've built brick by invisible brick out of assumptions and dreams and desperation. A promotion becomes validation. A relationship becomes salvation. An opportunity becomes identity. And when it slips through your fingers, it feels like the universe has taken something vital. But the Stoics would argue it was never yours to begin with. You remember standing at the edge of that opportunity, looking at it like it was a key. You thought it would unlock something, purpose, peace, finally being enough. But in truth, you were the one holding the lock shut, believing you needed a key at all. Desire, Epictetus warns, is a dangerous thing when it grips the soul too tightly. Not because wanting is wrong, but because the thing we want is often misunderstood. You weren't just chasing a goal. You were chasing what you believed that goal would give you: control, belonging, meaning. But those things don't live in the future. They don't live in achievements. They live, if they live anywhere, in how you choose to meet each moment. Let's go deeper. Can you name what you really wanted beneath the surface of that opportunity? Maybe it wasn't about the job, it was about feeling worthy. Maybe it wasn't about the relationship, it was about being seen. Maybe it wasn't about the move to a new city, it was about escaping something in yourself. The Stoics called this fantasia, the misleading impressions that arise when our emotions color reality. They taught that virtue is the only true good because it belongs entirely to you. Everything else is external things that you can prefer but must not cling to. And yet, you did cling, didn't you? That's okay. To be human is to want, to dream, to build castles in the mind. But what matters is what you do after the castle crumbles. Do you mourn the sand? Or do you start to see that you were always the builder, and that the skill to create meaning never left your hands? There's a strange freedom in realizing you wanted the wrong thing. It humbles you. It strips away illusion. It places your feet back on solid ground. You begin to see the beauty of simplicity again. You remember a moment, perhaps from childhood, when joy came from small things: the smell of rain, the feel of wind, a quiet afternoon without obligations. There was no big opportunity then, and yet you were whole. So why does adulthood trick us into thinking our worth lies in future victories? The philosopher Musonius Rufus believed that philosophy was not for lecture halls, but for daily life, for small, consistent practice. He said the person who learns to love virtue finds joy not in outcome, but in effort, not in applause, but in alignment. And alignment doesn't require anything grand. It only requires honesty. So tonight you peel back the layers of your wanting. You look at the image of what you chased and you see it for what it really was: a story. A useful story maybe, but not a permanent truth. You realize now that the opportunity you missed didn't rob you of anything essential. What mattered most, your character, your courage, your ability to respond, was never at risk. You still carry those things. And as you let go of what you thought you needed, you start to notice what's already here. The breath in your chest, the quiet in the room, the space around your thoughts. That's the strange paradox. When you release what you thought you couldn't live without, you begin to live more fully, more awake, less entangled in the chase. The lesson hidden in a missed opportunity isn't always about learning to try harder next time. Sometimes, it's about realizing you were enough, long before the opportunity came along. So tonight, you rest not in regret, but in this gentle truth. You thought you needed something outside of yourself to feel complete, but all you ever needed was the willingness to look within. You return again to that quiet ache, the longing that lingered after the moment passed. The way you tried to hold on to it, not with your hands but with your mind, like grasping at smoke. It slipped through, didn't it? No matter how many times you replayed the scenario, no matter how many angles you examined it from, or how many versions you crafted in your imagination where things went differently, still, it drifted. Still, it faded. And yet you kept reaching. That's the strange habit of the mind, to grasp at what cannot be held, to wrestle with what cannot be changed. You wanted to salvage it, to find the thread that would unravel the regret. Maybe if you understood it better. Maybe if you figured out what went wrong. Maybe if you could rewrite it, just once more in your head. But Stoicism reminds us of something that's both simple and brutally honest. You cannot lose what was never truly yours. Not if you follow nature. Not if you live in accordance with reason. You weren't meant to live in the past. The Stoics called this fixation an illusion, pathos, a kind of mental disturbance. Not because emotion is wrong, but because attachment to what no longer exists warps your ability to live in the present. And yet, part of you still tries, doesn't it? There's a moment you remember vividly. Late at night, maybe days or weeks after the opportunity slipped past. You stared at the ceiling, cycling through what if like a broken record. The rest of the world moved on, but inside you were looping. You may not have realized it then, but that loop was a kind of suffering of your own making. The Stoics were never indifferent to pain, but they did draw a line between pain and suffering. Pain is natural. Suffering is prolonged by your resistance to what is. You begin to see now how you made the ache worse, not by missing the opportunity, but by refusing to accept its absence. This is where the deeper work begins. You learn to release, not by force, not by shoving the memory away, but by softening your grip. You sit with the image of what you lost, and instead of trying to rescue it, you let it settle. You treat it like a bird that perched briefly on your windowsill and then flew away. It was never yours to keep. Its visit was the gift. Its absence is part of the rhythm. A story comes to mind. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, lost his entire fortune in a shipwreck, everything gone in a single moment. And his response, "Now I can pursue philosophy, not bitterness, not denial, just redirection." That's not to say you must be happy about what you missed, but you can choose not to be trapped by it. You notice something odd as you release the grasping. Your shoulders relax, your breath deepens. The world doesn't change, but your relationship to it does. And here comes a truth you've been circling for a while now. Sometimes the pursuit of closure is what keeps the wound open. We tell ourselves we can't move on until we understand it all, until we get the full picture, the satisfying answer. But life rarely gives us that. Most of our questions dissolve with time, not resolution. And the only real why that matters is how we choose to live after the story ends. So tonight, you stop chasing. You let the smoke drift. You sit still. You imagine what it would feel like to want nothing more from this memory, not revenge, not justice, not a different ending. Just peace. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, that peace begins to grow. You may always feel a flicker of sadness when you think back, but that's okay. Sadness is a sign that you cared, that something touched you, that you were awake to life. The Stoics didn't aim to erase emotion. They aimed to understand it so it wouldn't control them. You carry that understanding with you now. It hums beneath your skin like a gentle reminder. What you grasp for is already gone. But what remains is yours to shape. And what remains? Your character, your capacity to love even without getting what you want, your ability to sit in stillness and not flinch. You turn inward once more, not to analyze but to rest. You missed it, you grieved it, you grasped at smoke, and now you exhale. The world didn't stop, and neither did you. The ache begins to quiet, not because the memory disappears, but because something beneath it shifts. Where once there was a scramble to fix or retrieve, there's now a soft space opening, wide, calm, receptive. A stillness you hadn't noticed before. You begin to realize the stillness was there all along. It was simply waiting for you to stop fighting. It's strange how silence can feel like a teacher. When you stop filling the space with what-ifs and why-nots, something else arises. A quiet awareness, a gentle presence, a voice that doesn't speak in words but in clarity. This is the gift of stillness. The Stoics spoke often of tranquility, not as a passive numbness but as an active presence. Ataraxia, freedom from inner disturbance. Not from withdrawal but from alignment. From choosing what to attend to and how. You sit now in this quiet, like someone who has stopped swimming against the current and is finally floating, carried by something wiser than will. You start to observe rather than analyze. You watch your thoughts drift in like clouds across an open sky. Some are tinged with regret, others with longing, but they're just thoughts. They don't command you anymore. You realize that the story you've been telling yourself, the story of loss, of failure, of a chance not taken, was only one version. The version written by fear, by urgency, by the belief that your peace depends on a future that never arrived. But stillness tells a different story. In stillness, you see that you are not broken, that nothing essential was taken from you. That peace was never behind the next opportunity, but right here, beneath your rushing, beneath your expectations. You remember the Stoic idea of living according to nature. Not nature as forests and mountains, but your nature, your essence. And your nature at its core is rational, resilient, and capable of peace. You think of a lake undisturbed by wind, the surface calm, but underneath, depth, movement, life. That's what stillness feels like now, not emptiness, but deep presence. You recall how often you've confused activity with meaning, as if movement proves purpose, as if chasing, striving, achieving must be the way to worth. But tonight, in the quiet, you start to question that. Can you be enough even when you're not moving? Can you feel whole even when there's nothing to reach for? The Stoics would say yes, not just as a belief but as a discipline. The discipline of returning to yourself, again and again, especially when the world tries to pull you away. A memory comes. You sitting alone in a cafe, watching people pass outside. You had nothing urgent to do, and for a moment that felt wrong, like you were wasting time. But then something shifted. The light hit the window just so. A warm sip of tea, a breeze through the open door, and suddenly you were there, fully there, not missing anything, not wanting more. That too was stillness. You carry that memory now like a lantern. A quiet reminder that peace is not something you earn. It's something you uncover beneath the noise. There's a subtle paradox here. The more you let go of needing things to be different, the more fully you arrive in the life you already have. You return to your breath, to this moment, to this room. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has, because you've made space for silence, for slowness, for a kind of listening that doesn't require words. This is where healing begins. Not in fixing the past, not in chasing the next big thing, but in the radical act of being still with yourself exactly as you are. You sit now, eyes gently closed in the mind, breathing softly, like someone who finally stopped running. You feel the weight of expectation lift just a little. You sense your heart slowing to a steady rhythm, and for a flicker of a moment you realize you are not behind, you are not late, you are not lacking, you're just here. And that's more than enough. You find yourself thinking of a man long gone, an emperor, surrounded by war and disease, writing by lamplight while his body ached and the empire frayed at the edges. Marcus Aurelius. He was not seeking glory in that dim tent, nor recording victories. He was writing to himself, reminding himself, anchoring himself. Page after page, he returned to the same truths like a sailor checking the same compass. You do not control what happens. You only control how you meet it. You imagine his hand, slow and deliberate, the ink bleeding just a little on the worn parchment. Outside, generals argued. Inside, he sought stillness. He was a man of immense power, and yet he practiced the discipline of surrender. Not surrender as defeat, but as acceptance, as inner clarity. Even as fever gripped him, even as his army dwindled and friends betrayed him, he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." You let that sink in. Marcus could not prevent loss. He could not preserve health. He could not guarantee victory. But he could choose how he met each moment. And so can you. You think again of the opportunity you missed. You didn't have an empire to rule, perhaps, but your life, too, has its battles. And the weight of regret, if you let it, can feel as vast as a war front. But Marcus didn't write to conquer regret. He wrote to understand it, to disarm it, to live beside it without letting it rule him. Maybe that's your task, too. You don't need to erase the missed chance. You need to build a life around it, to absorb it into your story, not as a wound, but as a curve in the path. A soft turn you didn't expect, but that brought you somewhere deeper. You begin to see that wisdom often grows from what we cannot undo. That moment you froze, that hesitation that haunts you, it now feels less like a failure and more like a signpost. It pointed you toward the inner work, the kind no one sees, the kind that shapes everything. You reflect on the times since then when you've acted more clearly, more calmly, when you paused not from fear but from awareness. That's the residue of growth, of having walked through something without running from it. The Stoics believed that philosophy wasn't about theory, it was about habit, about living in harmony with your own reasoned choices. That's what Marcus practiced with his pen each night. And that's what you're doing now with your breath, with your listening, with your presence. You are becoming someone who doesn't need to rewrite the past in order to make peace with it. And here's a thought worth holding gently. Maybe the missed opportunity wasn't a misstep. Maybe it was a nudge toward the deeper lesson, toward the discipline of letting go, the grace of acceptance, the strength of showing up empty-handed and still whole. You remember how Marcus wrote not to impress, but to remind himself. Don't waste what's left of your life on anything but the cultivation of the inner self. So tonight you sit like that emperor might have, with nothing to prove, with everything to reflect on. You look again at your memory of that missed chance, but now, instead of a wall, it feels like a doorway, not to what might have been, but to the person you've become through living without it. And perhaps that's the secret. The things you lose don't always take something from you. Sometimes they give you back a clearer version of yourself. You sit with that thought a little longer. The room feels quieter now, the air a little softer. And somewhere inside you whisper, not with bitterness, not with defeat, but with gratitude. I didn't get what I wanted, but maybe I got what I needed. You turn now toward a strange, unsettling question, one that doesn't arrive like a shout, but more like a breath behind your thoughts. Was it really a loss or was it freedom? You sit with it quietly, feeling its shape. There was something so certain about the pain before, so clear-cut. You missed your chance and that was bad. Full stop. That was the script you carried. But now, something about that script feels thinner, less rigid. What if not getting what you wanted was not the universe closing a door on you, but opening another, just one you didn't know to look for? The Stoics urge you to examine impressions, to challenge automatic judgments, to see that most suffering doesn't come from events but from how we label them. Missed opportunity, failure, loss. These aren't facts, they're names, stories. And stories can be rewritten. You start to see your missed chance as something more ambiguous. Yes, you felt grief, but also relief, didn't you? That quiet breath you took once it passed, the strange lightness. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, been spared something you couldn't quite name. You think back to a moment not long after it all slipped through. Maybe you didn't notice it then. But now, in memory, it stands out. A calm you didn't expect. a moment of not needing to push anymore, of letting go. There's a paradox the Stoics hint at often. What looks like deprivation from the outside can be liberation on the inside. You imagine a bird in a cage whose door swings open. From a distance, it might look like the bird has lost the safety of its enclosure. But what it's gained, its flight, is something far richer. Could your missed opportunity be something like that? You look around at your life as it is now, the people who remained, the skills you built, the thoughts you've come to know as your own. Would these things exist if the past had gone differently? Seneca once wrote, "A setback is nothing other than a preparation for the soul." Perhaps what you missed prepared you, quietly, silently, without you realizing it at the time. Maybe you were meant to discover something else, something far less glamorous, but infinitely more vital, the ability to stay grounded in the face of uncertainty. Because what happens when your sense of purpose is too tied to a single outcome? You become fragile. You attach your peace to things you cannot keep. You hang your identity on the weather. But when you begin to live without clinging, without insisting that life deliver what you imagined, you begin to feel strangely light. That's not to say it doesn't still sting sometimes. It does. You can still look back and feel a flicker of longing, but now it carries something else too, a respect for what came after. You think of how often life teaches in reverse. First the event, then the meaning. First the pain, then the clarity. That's the strange rhythm of growth. You rarely know what you're becoming until you've already become it. And what have you become? Someone who can sit with absence. Someone who doesn't panic at silence. Someone who has learned to hear the quiet lessons beneath disappointment. You start to feel proud, not of avoiding pain, but of surviving it with your heart intact. That missed chance. It narrowed your path, but it deepened it. You realize now that some doors are meant to close, not because you weren't good enough to walk through them, but because they weren't yours to open. And your job as a Stoic in training is not to mourn the closed door forever, but to walk with dignity through the hallways that remain, to meet what comes next with steadiness, with curiosity, with love even. You breathe a little slower now. You sense space expanding within your chest. This doesn't mean you won't feel regret again. You will, but it will be softer, more like a shadow than a weight, a reminder, not a chain. And that, perhaps, is the freedom hidden in every missed opportunity. Not freedom from discomfort, but freedom from illusion. Not the freedom to get everything you want, but the strength to live wisely when you don't. You notice something odd as you reflect further. The day you missed that opportunity, nothing dramatic happened. No alarms rang, no shift in the sky. The world continued as if untouched by the gravity of your moment. Traffic kept moving. Emails kept coming. The same sun crossed the same sky. And yet for you, something had changed. You were expecting the world to mark it, to recognize your missed moment with a flash of insight or some cinematic resolution. But nothing came. No explanation, no clean lesson. It was quiet, unremarkable even. And in that quiet you felt abandoned by meaning, as if something so significant inside you deserved a response from the outside. But the Stoics would remind you, the world owes you no confirmation of your inner experience. Not because your experience isn't real, but because nature doesn't bend to our narratives. It simply moves. And our task is to move with it, not against it. You begin to understand, real transformation doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes the most important shifts happen in silence, in the space where nothing seems to be happening at all. That's the paradox of missed opportunities. They don't always break you. Sometimes they empty you in a way that makes space for something else, something quieter, deeper, more your own. You look back now and see that the silence that followed your missed moment wasn't a punishment. It was a pause, a clearing, a moment of grace wrapped in stillness. The Stoics believed that the universe is governed by logos, a rational structure, an order not always visible. So even when life seems to give no answer, it's still unfolding according to reason. And your role isn't to decode every outcome, but to bring virtue into every response. There's something strangely comforting in this. That meaning isn't something you wait for. It's something you bring. You remember a time, maybe not long after, when you noticed a small joy, a laugh with a friend, a walk under soft light, a book that touched you. And for a second, you felt alive again. It didn't cancel out the regret, but it layered it with something else. A reminder that life kept offering itself, even after you missed what you thought mattered most. And in that moment, it hit you. Not all turning points come with fanfare. Some arrive as silence, as stillness, as the absence of what you expected. That's what this has been, hasn't it? A lesson not in success, not in failure, but in being with what is. You think of Chrysippus, another Stoic, who built his philosophy not on wild theories but on structure, logic. He believed that even chance had a place in the grand design, that even things we don't understand might still be necessary. So maybe your missed opportunity wasn't wrong. Maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was essential, not because of what it gave you, but because of what it removed. And in the aftermath, when nothing happened, you were invited to listen, not for answers, but for yourself, for the voice beneath the striving, the one that asks, "Who are you when there is nothing to win?" That question lives in the silence now. You sit with it, not needing to respond. Not tonight. Tonight, it's enough to simply hear it, to be with the echo, to rest inside the quiet truth that some of the most important growth happens when no one's watching, even you. You return to your breath, not as a ritual, not as a technique, but as something more ancient, more essential. It's been there through everything, hasn't it? In the hesitation, the silence, the replaying of the past, the letting go. The breath doesn't judge. It doesn't ask whether you succeeded or failed, whether you were bold or afraid. It simply continues, offering you, moment after moment, a fresh beginning. You notice how, in all your thinking about the missed opportunity, you rarely stop to feel your own presence, your own aliveness, the fact that regardless of what slipped away, you remained. You're still here, still breathing, still capable of choosing. That's the gift the Stoics return to again and again. The present moment as the only realm in which you hold any power. Not the past, which cannot be changed. Not the future, which cannot be guaranteed. But now, this breath, this heartbeat, this thought. You imagine yourself standing at the edge of that missed moment once more. But this time, instead of straining to reach it, you stand calmly, like a traveler who finally accepts the map has changed. You were never lost. The path simply turned. And in turning, it brought you to something far more important than any opportunity. It brought you to yourself. You reflect now on how much energy you've spent resisting what happened. Or rather, what didn't happen. The conversations in your mind, the invisible battles, the weight of trying to rewrite something that no longer exists. That's the real exhaustion, isn't it? Not the event itself, but the ongoing struggle with it. You think of a metaphor the Stoics might appreciate. A person dragging a heavy cart of stones across the desert, convinced each stone is essential. But when you finally stop and open the cart, you find that most of the weight is made of stories, of assumptions, of should have and what if. What would it mean to leave some of that behind? Not to pretend it never mattered, but to walk forward without needing it to define you. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." You see now how true that is. The worst parts of this missed chance weren't what happened. They were what you imagined it meant about you, that you were unworthy, unlucky, unprepared. Too late, but none of those stories were fixed truths. They were just interpretations, and interpretations can be changed. You realize now that you are not the missed opportunity. You are the one who lived through it, who learned from it, who kept breathing through it. There's a quiet power in that. You begin to feel something new, not triumph, not closure, but respect. Respect for the journey you've taken inside yourself. For the parts you've seen clearly now, maybe for the first time. Like the part of you that still hopes. The part of you that is learning to be patient. The part that still listens for meaning, even in the silence. These are not weaknesses. They are signals of growth. The Stoics valued virtues, not just virtue in the moral sense, but excellence in character, integrity, depth. And what is more excellent than continuing to show up for life, even when it doesn't give you what you asked for. You sit now with that sense of inner clarity. No fireworks, no grand revelation, just the quiet knowing that, despite everything, you are still capable of meeting this moment with openness. You don't need to erase the past. You don't need to predict the future. You need only breathe, respond, live with intention. That's the core of Stoic peace, not a life without missed chances, but a life where you are no longer defined by them. You return to the breath again. Soft, unforced, whole, letting go of the old narrative, and in its place, a deeper silence. One that welcomes you not with answers but with rest. There's a moment, so quiet you almost miss it, when your relationship to the past begins to soften. Not because you've solved it, not because it's fixed, but because you're no longer asking it to be something it isn't. You've stopped dragging it behind you like a protest sign, stopped using it as proof of what the universe owes you. It just is now, a chapter, a part of your story, no longer the whole book. And in that softening, something new emerges: compassion, not for others, not yet, but for yourself. You look back not with frustration or shame, but with something gentler. You see the version of you who froze, who hesitated, who missed the turn, and instead of scolding them, you start to understand them. They weren't foolish. They were trying. They weren't weak. They were overwhelmed. They weren't lost. They were simply learning. The Stoics rarely used the word forgiveness the way modern people do, but they understood what it meant to accept imperfection with dignity. They didn't demand flawless action from the self, only that you continue to strive for wisdom, even after you fall short. So here's the practice now. You hold space for the version of you that didn't know what you know now. You sit with them in your imagination. You offer no advice, no correction, just presence, like sitting beside a younger sibling who made a choice they now regret. You don't need to fix them. You just need to say, in your own quiet way, "You were doing your best." That phrase might feel strange at first, uncomfortable, but let it land. You were doing your best with what you had, with what you knew in that moment. And that's enough. There's no perfection in Stoicism, only the practice of returning, again and again, back to reason, back to presence, back to what's in your control. You begin to see now that the past version of you isn't the problem. The problem was your expectation that they should have been someone else. But expectations are slippery things. They wear the mask of virtue but often disguise control. The Stoics caution us. If we cling too tightly to how things should have gone, we blind ourselves to how things are. And how are things now? You're breathing, you're reflecting, you're here. None of that was promised. You feel a subtle warmth rise in your chest. Not joy exactly, but ease. You realize that life didn't stop when you made that mistake. It kept unfolding, patiently, as if waiting for you to catch up. You think of Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius's adopted father and predecessor, as emperor. Not a philosopher by trade, but a man whose reign was remembered for one thing: calm steadiness. He didn't seek greatness. He simply showed up each day with care, with patience, with presence. Maybe that's the real goal, not a dramatic comeback, not a perfect recovery, just steady movement forward with grace. You reflect on all the moments since that missed chance, when you acted from greater clarity, when you paused before reacting, when you listened more deeply, when you responded with softness instead of urgency. Those weren't accidents. They were the fruit of this quiet work, and they will continue to grow. Because now, instead of punishing yourself into progress, you're practicing a different path: self-respect without perfection, reflection without shame, direction without demand. That's the paradox. When you stop needing the past to justify your present, you begin to walk more lightly into the future. You take one last glance at that version of yourself, the one who froze, and you say goodbye. Not as in forgetting, but as in release. Because you no longer need to carry them. You are here now. Wiser, softer, still whole. You wake not from sleep, but from a long inward silence. It's as if something subtle has shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but like dawn bleeding slowly through the edge of night. You begin to see how much of your pain wasn't about the event itself, but your resistance to its outcome. You spent so long wishing things had gone differently, but now you wonder if they were always meant to unfold just like this. This thought doesn't arise from naivete, it comes from something deeper, a kind of spiritual exhale. Not forced optimism, but perspective. You remember one of the most central Stoic teachings, amor fati, love your fate, not just acceptance, not tolerance, but love. It sounds impossible at first. Why would anyone love the loss of a dream, the end of a path, the silence where a victory should have been? But the Stoics saw this as the final step in wisdom, to look not only at the pleasant moments and say, yes, but to gaze upon the painful, the messy, the unwelcome, and whisper, this too. You feel yourself drawn to this idea, not as a command, but as an invitation. What would it mean to love this missed opportunity, to love that it humbled you, to love that it softened you, to love that it opened doors you couldn't have imagined if the original one had stayed open? You recall how rivers carve stone not with force but with patience, slowly, repeatedly. And maybe this loss carved you in ways that were invisible until now. You think of Epictetus, born a slave, his leg crippled by a master's cruelty. And yet he taught others how to be free, not in body but in mind. He never taught that fate was kind, only that fate was indifferent, and it was your response that made all the difference. And here you are now, responding not with resentment but with reverence. You're beginning to see the outline of something larger, not a plan, but a pattern. You see how each loss trimmed away something false. Each silence stripped a layer of illusion. Each closed door asked you, who are you without the outcome? And every time you answered that question, you came closer to your core. What remains when nothing goes as planned? What stays when the applause fades? What endures when you can no longer prove yourself through success? The answer lives quietly inside you. Character, discipline, humility, presence. You feel them now not as lofty ideals but as real companions. Traits forged not in ease but in effort, in disappointment, in choosing not to become bitter. You breathe into that truth. The breath feels different now, not like survival but like arrival. You're no longer rushing toward some invisible prize. You're simply here, whole. You think of the parts of yourself that once relied on being chosen, being praised, being rewarded. They were loud once, but they've quieted, because now you choose yourself, not out of ego, but out of alignment. That's what the Stoics meant when they said the wise person is sufficient unto themselves, not because they don't need others, but because they don't depend on the external for internal peace. You walk now with less to prove. You speak with less urgency. You let silence hang a little longer before filling it. And strangely, you begin to trust life again, not because it always gives you what you want, but because you know you can meet whatever comes with steadiness. That's what you've earned through the thing you thought you couldn't survive. Not a trophy, not a second chance, but the quiet confidence that you are not fragile, you are not unfinished, you are not broken. You are, in fact, more prepared than ever to live this life, fully, attentively, freely. And all because you missed what you thought you needed most. The horizon of the past begins to blur, not vanish, but soften, as though you're finally able to look at it through gentler eyes. You've spent so long standing on that edge, staring backward, waiting for the outline of the old dream to make sense. But the farther you walk from it, the clearer it becomes. Not everything that mattered had to last. Not everything that faded was a failure. Not everything you missed was meant to be caught. You carry that understanding now not as a burden but as a compass. Because here's what no one tells you. When you no longer define your life by what didn't happen, you free yourself to shape what can. That's the moment you're in now. And it's quiet. There's no grand turning point. No fireworks, just a softening, a loosening, a release. You begin to notice the space that regret once occupied. It's not empty, it's fertile, ready for something new. The Stoics taught that we are always in practice, never finished. That the art of living is not found in certainty but in clarity. Not in always choosing correctly but in responding wisely. And now, your responses are changing. You no longer jump at every opportunity out of fear you'll miss something. You no longer race to fix discomfort as soon as it arises. You no longer measure your worth by outcomes alone. There's a calm now, not because life is easier, but because you are steadier. You remember a recent moment, small, maybe even forgettable to someone else. But for you, it was different. A conversation you didn't force. A decision you made without anxiety. A no you offered without guilt. That's the evidence. Not of healing alone, but of transformation. You aren't just someone who's moved past a missed chance. You're someone who's been refined by it. You think again of the Stoic ideal, a person unshaken by external shifts, rooted in internal virtue. You're not there yet. None of us ever truly are, but you're closer. Not because the world changed, but because your way of seeing did. That's the real shift, isn't it? Not in what you chase, but in what you choose to carry. You used to carry the weight of perfection, the burden of needing to prove yourself, the ache of almost. Now you carry something lighter: stillness, discernment, a deep knowing that what's meant for you will ask for your presence, not your panic. And so, when new chances come, and they will, you won't grasp at them from fear. You'll meet them with calm hands, with clear eyes, with the understanding that opportunities are not salvation, they're invitations, and you get to decide how to respond. That's what this entire path has taught you: not how to win, not how to avoid loss, but how to stay whole, even when the shape of your life changes. You remember a final Stoic thought from Marcus Aurelius: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The thing you once called an obstacle, the moment you missed, was never the end. It was the start of a different kind of strength, one you couldn't have learned any other way. You begin to walk differently now. Not faster, not with more certainty, but with less noise. There's a silence in your step, a kind of grace, as though somewhere along the path you stopped needing to outrun your past. You feel it in subtle places. The way you speak, measured, not rushed. The way you pause before acting, not out of fear but care. The way you look at others, not with comparison but curiosity. These small changes whisper a bigger truth. You've made peace not just with the opportunity you missed, but with the part of you that missed it. That's the quiet miracle, isn't it? The missed chance wasn't just about an external event. It became a mirror. And through that mirror, you saw yourself more clearly than ever. And now, you no longer flinch at your own reflection. The Stoics didn't seek to escape being human. They sought to embrace it, with discipline, yes, but also with compassion. The discipline to ask, is this within my control? And the compassion to answer, even if it isn't, I am still enough. You notice how this shapes your view of others, too. You find yourself judging less. You see someone hesitate, and instead of labeling them as weak, you recognize that moment, the pause, the doubt, the trembling before a choice. You've been there. You are there still sometimes. But now, instead of shame, you carry understanding. And in understanding, there's connection. And in connection, there's freedom. You think about how often our pain isolates us, not because it's unique, but because we believe no one else carries it. But they do, quietly, beneath the surface. Everyone has a moment they'd redo, a word they didn't say, a road they didn't take. And maybe that's not tragic. Maybe it's what binds us. Because the most universal experience isn't triumph, it's imperfection. And the most stoic response isn't indifference, it's presence. You start to see how often you used to rush toward the next thing, as if newness itself could cleanse the ache. But now you don't rush. Not because you're stalled, but because you've found value in being with what is. You picture yourself returning to that old scene, the missed opportunity. This time not to change it, not to fix it, but to sit beside it like a friend. To place your hand on the moment and say, "You helped make me who I am." That's not rewriting history. That's reclaiming it. You think again of Marcus Aurelius, who faced loss after loss, his children, his health, his allies, yet never lost his core. Not because he armored himself, but because he understood himself. You're starting to understand yourself too. And with that understanding comes freedom, not the loud kind, but the kind that lets you walk through the world without dragging every old story behind you. You leave space now, in your schedule, in your conversations, in your thoughts, space to breathe, space to not know, space to be without proving. That space is sacred. And the person who lives there now, you, is no longer defined by the thing that once hurt so much. You're shaped by it, yes. Softened, strengthened, clarified, but not defined. You are something else now. A presence, a witness, a soul in motion. And the path ahead, whatever it holds, no longer threatens your worth. Because your worth was never in the outcome. It was always in how you showed up. And you are showing up now, fully, quietly, freely. There's a quiet moment somewhere between reflection and arrival where you realize you're no longer waiting. Not waiting for resolution. Not waiting for the universe to explain itself. Not waiting for the better version of your life to begin. You've stepped out of the holding pattern. You've landed. The past still echoes, yes, but it doesn't dictate your direction anymore. It's there like an old song, familiar, tender, but no longer on repeat. You can let it play and move on without needing to change the melody. And in its place, a strange and beautiful openness. Not certainty, no, but something stronger, readiness. You're ready to live again, not in pursuit of perfection, but in conversation with reality. The way it is, not the way it could have been. The Stoics might call this living in agreement with nature, but not nature as mere biology or landscape. Nature as the unfolding of life itself, the unpredictable, impermanent, ever-moving rhythm of all things. You see now, the missed opportunity wasn't a failure to align with life. It was part of life. It was one of the many waves the ocean of your existence would send your way, and you've learned to ride it. You've learned to stop clinging to the shore. You think of the image the Stoics often return to, the archer. You aim with care, with practice, with intention. But once the arrow leaves the bow, its path is no longer yours to control. The wind, the tension in the string, the tremble of your hands, they shape what follows. And your task always is to aim again, to adjust, to stay in the practice. That's where you are now, not after the story, but inside it, awake to what each day asks of you. You notice how the quiet is no longer lonely. It feels like company now. Like standing beneath a vast night sky, not seeking a sign but simply watching, listening, trusting. The urge to chase has softened. The hunger to correct has stilled. You're not passive, you still care, you still act. But your action no longer comes from panic, it comes from alignment. You do what is yours to do, and you release what isn't. This is the deepest Stoic discipline. Not control, but consent. You begin to say yes, not to every event, but to every moment as a teacher, even this one. You look around your life now. Maybe it's quieter than you imagined. Maybe it's simpler, but it's real, it's yours. And you are finally inside it, fully present, without the distortion of what might have been. You smile, gently, at the realization. You've become the kind of person you once thought only existed after things went right. But things didn't go as planned. And here you are anyway, still breathing, still loving, still choosing. That's resilience. Not bouncing back, but becoming different because of what you carried through. And when you think of the opportunity you once missed, it no longer feels like a cliff. It feels like a bend. A turn you didn't expect, but one that revealed a new view. You keep walking now, not faster, not further, but freer. Because this time, you're not chasing a version of life that was never yours. You're living the one that is. You exhale slowly. The story is nearly complete, not because everything is resolved, but because you've stopped needing resolution as proof of meaning. The missed opportunity still missed, but it no longer misses you. You are fully here. And that is the real ending, not a dramatic reversal, not some cosmic reward for suffering. Just presence, clear, whole, and finally at peace. You sit now not as someone waiting for what could have been, but as someone welcoming what is. And it's enough. Your hands are empty, but your heart is full. The Stoics believed the highest good wasn't status or success or even comfort. It was virtue, the quiet excellence of living in harmony with reason, with nature, with yourself. And this moment right now might be the clearest glimpse you've had of it. Not because you triumphed, but because you endured without bitterness. You didn't use the missed chance as an excuse to retreat. You used it as a doorway inward. And what you found inside was not a wound but a seed, a quiet strength that grows in the soil of acceptance. The arc of your reflection has led you here, not to a place of perfection, but of perspective. You remember all the moments along the way, the shock of what didn't happen, the slow unraveling of your expectations, the long silence, the inward questions, the glimpses of calm, the first breath of freedom, the gradual return to presence, the discovery that you, not the mischance, held the power all along. And now you begin to let go of the story, not because you want to forget, but because you're ready to live beyond it. The memory may remain, the ache may flicker from time to time, but it will no longer define the rhythm of your days. You walk lighter now, and with that lightness comes something rare: availability to beauty, to others, to life itself. Not in some perfect or enlightened way, but in a human way. A way that leaves room for mystery, for mistakes, for mercy. You close your eyes, you feel the breath again, steady, quiet, alive. This is your anchor now. This is your home. And as you enter the final stretch of this inward path, you offer a quiet prayer, not to change the past, not to secure the future, but to remain open, curious, present, because what you've learned through all of this is simple but profound. Even in the absence of what you thought you needed, you are already whole. So now, let the story fade. Let the edges blur, the light grow softer. You've walked through memory, through grief, through the silent hallways of your own mind. And you've come out not victorious but aware, which in its own way is far more powerful. Feel the air around you. Feel the weight in your body begin to loosen. Let the breath guide you, not forward, not back, but simply here. In this moment, where there is nothing to fix, nothing to chase, nothing to regret, just stillness, just you. The missed opportunity was never the end of your story. It was a bend in the river, a quiet turning, one that brought you into deeper waters, one that shaped you with its silence. You don't need to know what comes next. You only need to know that you can meet it with grace, with courage, with presence. Let your thoughts settle now, like snow at the bottom of a shaken globe. Let the body rest. Let the noise